Security, arrest this woman for trespassing. She doesn't belong here, the store manager Ashley shrieked. Her voice, dripping with a false authority she wore like a designer's suit, was aimed at an elderly black woman named Margaret, who had come into the boutique simply to buy some clothes. Every staff member in the shop turned to stare, their faces masks of disgust and suspicion. Ashley Hamilton, a 36-year-old with perfectly styled blonde hair, watched Margaret like a hawk circling its prey. The tension in the air was a palpable thing, growing heavier with each passing second. Margaret had wanted only to shop, but Ashley had already passed judgment. A sharp crack echoed through the store, a sound immediately swallowed by an eruption of laughter from the staff. They were pointing, mocking the elderly woman who stood with impossible grace, not even lifting a hand to her stinging cheek. The security guard, Officer Mike Johnson, rushed over, handcuffs glinting, ready to arrest Margaret as if she were a common criminal. The staff celebrated this moment of twisted glory, high-fiving each other as if they had won some perverse game. Ashley smirked, certain she had protected her precious store from an undesirable. They had humiliated, assaulted, and were about to have a woman arrested whose only crime was shopping while black. But then, the world shifted on its axis. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward. The regional director, Victoria Sterling, burst into the store as if her life depended on it, screaming words that would haunt every person there for the rest of their days. Because the woman they had just racially abused, mocked, and physically assaulted wasn't just any customer. She was about to become their worst nightmare. The truth about everyone in that store was a story waiting to unravel. It began with Margaret Washington, the 68-year-old woman who was a breath away from being placed in handcuffs. What these employees didn't know was that they had just assaulted one of the most powerful women in American business history. Margaret wasn't just a customer. She was a self-made billionaire who had built an empire from nothing. Born into poverty in rural Alabama, she had worked her way up from cleaning offices at night to founding the Washington Luxury Group, a fashion empire she had sold just 5 years earlier for a staggering $3.2 billion. But here was the secret. 6 months ago, through a network of shell companies, Margaret had purchased the entire prestige boutique chain. She owned every store, every piece of merchandise, every paycheck these people had ever received. She was conducting surprise inspections, dressed in simple clothes, to test the true culture of her new company. Margaret was dignified and soft-spoken, but when crossed, she was devastating. She had ruined billion-dollar competitors with a single phone call, and these employees had just crossed her in the worst way imaginable. And the people who had just signed their own warrants for professional ruin? Ashley Hamilton truly believed she ran an exclusive establishment. After 10 years of climbing the luxury retail ladder, she saw herself as the gatekeeper of high society, judging every person's worth by their appearance. She took a sadistic pleasure in humiliating customers she deemed unworthy, never realizing her latest victim could buy and sell her entire existence 1,000 times over. Her right-hand man, Brad Mitchell, was her partner in discrimination. He had blocked Margaret from the merchandise, his career ambitions tied to mimicking Ashley's cruelty. Tiffany Roberts, a senior sales associate, was the one who had loudly announced that certain people always steal, often mocking customers on social media for sport. Kyle Stevens, the junior associate, thought racist monkey sounds were the height of comedy, a way to gain popularity with his coworkers. Jessica Parker, the cashier, routinely refused service to minority customers, believing she was protecting the store's image when she was only destroying her own future. And Officer Mike Johnson, the security guard, had built a reputation on racial profiling, never questioning an order to remove a minority shopper. He was seconds away from attempting to arrest the owner of the company that signed his paychecks. Racing toward them was the one person who could stop the catastrophe. Victoria Sterling, the regional director. As Margaret's most trusted executive, she was the only one who knew her boss's true identity. Watching the security feeds from corporate headquarters, she had seen the horror unfold and was now in a desperate race against time, knowing she was about to deliver news that would shatter every career in that building. It had all begun on a beautiful Tuesday morning. Margaret Washington had walked into Prestige Boutique with the simplest of intentions. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was a grandmother looking for a beautiful outfit for her granddaughter's college graduation and some elegant jewelry for her niece's wedding. She had deliberately dressed down in a simple navy blue dress and modest pearl earrings, looking like any other customer. And that was the very thing that would expose the boutique's ugly truth. The moment she stepped through the glass doors, the staff began to size her up. Their eyes swept over her simple attire, and judgment formed in their minds. From behind the counter, Ashley took one look at the elegant black woman and made her decision. She didn't belong. Unaware of the storm brewing, Margaret began to browse, her fingers gliding along beautiful fabrics perfect for the graduation. That's when the harassment started. "Keep an eye on that one," Ashley said to her assistant, just loud enough for Margaret to hear. "You know how these people are." Margaret ignored it, pulling out a burgundy dress. Ashley approached, a fake smile plastered on her face. "These dresses are quite expensive," she said with condescending sweetness. "Perhaps our sales section in the back would be more manageable." "Price isn't a concern," Margaret replied calmly. Ashley laughed, a short, sharp sound full of mockery. "Price isn't a concern?" she repeated loudly. "Ma'am, these dresses start at $3,000. Margaret simply asked to see a few options in her size. Frustrated, Ashley watched as she moved to the jewelry section. Margaret's eyes fell on a stunning diamond necklace. "Could I see that, please?" she asked Jessica at the counter. Jessica looked at her as if she'd asked for the crown jewels. "Ma'am, that necklace costs $15,000, she said, expecting the number to chase her away. "Yes," Margaret replied. "I'd like to see it." Jessica called for her manager. Ashley rushed over. "The Cartier piece?" "Ma'am, that's 15000, $15,000. She spoke slowly, as if to a child. "I heard you," Margaret said, her patience thinning. "May I see it?" "With all due respect," Ashley scoffed. "The department stores at the mall have some nice costume jewelry that might be more in your price range." The insult was a direct hit. A billionaire was being told to shop for fake jewelry at the mall. Margaret maintained her dignity. "I am a paying customer and I'd like to examine the merchandise." Ashley's politeness vanished, replaced by open hostility. "You're wasting our time. This is a luxury boutique for serious buyers, not a museum for people who can't afford to be here." The other staff members gathered, smirking, some filming with their phones. Realizing she was being denied service because of her race, Margaret took out her own phone to document the interaction. "What are you doing?" Ashley demanded. "I'm recording this," Margaret said calmly. "I believe I'm being discriminated against." Ashley's face flushed with rage. "You are not recording in my store. Give me that phone." She lunged forward, trying to snatch it from Margaret's hand. Margaret stepped back, holding her phone protectively. "You're causing a scene!" Ashley screamed. Consumed with fury at being challenged, she raised her hand and delivered a vicious slap across Margaret's face. The sound echoed through the silent boutique like a gunshot. In that deafening silence, Officer Johnson saw his moment. He had built his career on turning victims into criminals, and Ashley gave him the opening he needed. "That's assault!" she shrieked, pointing at Margaret. "She was being aggressive. She threatened me. Arrest her right now." The logic was impossibly twisted, but Johnson didn't hesitate. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," he announced, moving toward Margaret, his handcuffs ready. The staff erupted in cheers. They clapped, they filmed, they celebrated as if they had just witnessed a great victory. "This is the best day ever," one shouted. The customers joined in, phones out, recording what they assumed was justice being served. The cold steel of the handcuffs was inches from Margaret's wrists. Johnson grabbed her arm, preparing to snap them shut on the most powerful woman in American retail. And then, the world exploded. The front door of Prestige Boutique didn't just open, it detonated. Victoria Sterling hit it with such force that the reinforced glass fractured, sending a spiderweb of cracks across the pristine entrance, shattering the boutique's illusion of civility forever. She burst through the entrance not like a person, but like a force of nature, a human hurricane born of sheer panic. It was as if she had seen the apocalypse begin and was now racing to stop the final seal from being broken. Her normally immaculate hair was a storm cloud of disarray, streaming behind her as if she'd run through a gale. Her designer suit, a fortress of corporate authority, was wrinkled and disheveled from a dead sprint. Her face was not merely pale, it was a bloodless, paper-white mask of terror. She moved with a speed no one had ever witnessed from a C-suite executive. "Stop!" Victoria's scream was a raw, primal sound, the kind of cry torn from a parent watching their child dart into oncoming traffic. "Stop! Right now! What have you done? What have you done?" The celebration died as if a plug had been pulled, plunging the room into an abrupt, shocking silence. Johnson, the security guard, froze with the handcuffs still in his hands, Margaret's wrists hovering inches from the cold steel. Ashley's applause died mid-clap, her hands suspended in the air like a macabre statue. Every phone stopped recording. Every conversation was severed mid-word. Every head in the store turned to stare at the woman who had exploded into their midst as if fleeing a collapsing building. Victoria stood heaving, gasping for breath, her chest rising and falling like a marathon runner at the finish line. Her eyes, wide with a horror reserved for disaster films, scanned the scene, her mind clearly struggling to process a reality too terrible to accept. "Victoria?" Ashley's voice was small, the triumphant excitement draining from her face like water from a cracked dam. "What are you doing here? We're just handling a difficult customer. Everything's under control." "Difficult customer?" Victoria's voice fractured with a disbelief so profound it seemed to vibrate through the marble floor. "Is that what you call this?" Ashley glanced around, a new and unfamiliar nervousness creeping into her posture. "Well, yes. She was causing a scene, being disruptive. When we tried to handle it professionally, she became aggressive." Victoria's laugh was not a sound of humor. It was the sound of sanity fraying in real time, high, hysterical, and broken. "Professional?" she echoed, the word dripping with a horror that chilled the air. "You think any part of this was professional? Do you have any idea, any comprehension at all, of who you just assaulted?" The word assaulted struck the room like a physical blow. Ashley staggered back, her expression a rapid-fire sequence of confusion, dawning realization, and the first icy touch of genuine fear. "Assaulted? No one was assaulted. She was recording without permission, and I just—" Victoria's next words would become legend in business schools, a case study in corporate catastrophe. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a falling empire. "This," Victoria announced, her voice dropping to the deadly calm found in the eye of a hurricane, "is Margaret Washington. She doesn't shop here. She doesn't browse here. She isn't a customer. She owns here. She owns this store, this company. Every building in this chain, every piece of merchandise you are standing beside, every computer, every security camera, every price tag, and every single paycheck you have ever received." The silence that followed was not just quiet, it was a total vacuum of sound. It was the moment between the flash of lightning and the crack of thunder, the world holding its breath for the inevitable devastation. You could hear the frantic thump of individual heartbeats. You could hear the low hum of the air conditioning. Ashley Hamilton's face was a canvas of ruin. Confusion warred with disbelief, then surrendered to a sickening realization as she recalled magazine covers and business segments. And then came the final emotion, pure, absolute, world-ending terror. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed, a dead weight hitting the Italian marble floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot through the silent store. The thud of her body seemed to awaken everyone to the sheer magnitude of the disaster. Tiffany Roberts looked at her phone, the recording light still blinking, and realized with dawning horror that she had just documented herself committing a career-ending, life-altering act of discrimination against one of the most powerful women in the country. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely tap the screen, fumbling to delete a video that technology had already immortalized, whisking it away to the cloud, backing it up on servers she would never reach. The evidence of her bigotry was now preserved in digital amber. Kyle Stevens' celebratory high morphed into heart-stopping panic. Every racist joke, every disgusting monkey sound he had made, the social media post from 15 minutes ago, a photo of Margaret captioned, "Another ghetto wannabe trying to shop where she don't belong." It was all evidence. He had racially abused the woman who signed his checks. Brad Mitchell began to hyperventilate, his breath catching in short, ragged gasps. As assistant manager, he had been Ashley's enforcer, physically blocking Margaret from the merchandise, sneering that her kind didn't belong. He hadn't just destroyed his career, he had vaporized his future. Jessica Parker scrolled frantically through her phone, trying to delete her own digital footprints, photos, Instagram stories mocking the undesirable customer. But it was hopeless. Everything was already out there, permanent and undeletable. Officer Johnson stared at the handcuffs in his grip, He had been seconds from arresting a billionaire, the owner of this multi-billion-dollar empire, a woman who could dismantle his entire life with a single phone call. But Victoria wasn't finished. She raised her phone, her voice now steady with the eerie calm of a post-disaster survivor. "Emergency board meeting now," she commanded. "Yes, immediately. Cancel everything. We have a code red catastrophe at store 47. Margaret has been racially profiled and physically assaulted by our staff. Yes, you heard me. Margaret Washington." She repeated the unbelievable facts, each word a hammer blow. "I don't care if they're in meetings with heads of state. Get them on a video call, or we won't have a company left by morning." Victoria's phone lit up like a switchboard in a crisis center. The corporate machine roared to life. Orders were issued to preserve all security footage, every angle of the assault, every racist slur, now critical evidence. Legal teams were assembled. The real panic, the staff was about to learn, had only just begun. Brad Mitchell was the first to break completely. He scrambled forward on his knees before Margaret, tears carving paths through his panicked expression. "Please, Mrs. Washington, I am so sorry. I was just following orders. Ashley, she told us to watch certain customers. I have student loans, a sick mother. Please don't destroy my life." It was a pathetic spectacle. A grown man groveling, invoking the most infamous excuse in history for his own cruel choices. Tiffany Roberts was sobbing hysterically, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face. "I didn't mean it. It was the culture here. Ashley encouraged it. I was just trying to fit in. I have rent, car payments. Please." She blamed her environment, as if peer pressure was a justification for inhumanity. Kyle Stevens babbled to anyone who would listen, his voice high with panic. "Those sounds, they were jokes. I'm an equal opportunity joker. I have black friends, I listen to hip-hop. I voted for Obama. It wasn't real racism." He believed the absurdity of his own defense, that declaring his racism a joke would somehow neutralize its poison. Jessica Parker tried a different, more insulting tactic. "I never saw color," she declared with desperate, hollow conviction. "I am completely colorblind. I judge people by their character." The lie was obscene, uttered in a room where cameras had recorded her doing the exact opposite. Victoria watched the cascade of pathetic excuses with cold disgust. Slowly, Ashley Hamilton stirred on the floor, groaning as consciousness returned like a tidal wave of horror. Her eyes fluttered open, and the full, crushing weight of her reality came flooding back. The nightmare was real, and the reckoning was here. Margaret Washington stepped forward, Victoria Sterling at her side like a vengeful archangel. The red handprint on Margaret's cheek was a stark brand, a visible testament to the assault. But when she spoke, her voice was calm, steady, and devastating. "I want each of you to listen," she began, her quiet words commanding more power than any shout. "Because I am going to tell you exactly what you did. And then, I am going to tell you what will happen to you because of it." She turned to Ashley, who was shakily pulling herself up against a jewelry counter. "Ashley Hamilton, you physically assaulted the owner of this company. But that was merely the climax of your performance. You profiled me the moment I entered. You directed your staff to treat me like a criminal. You publicly humiliated me, insisting I couldn't afford anything in my own store. And when I documented your bigotry, you struck me." Margaret's gaze was unwavering. "Every word, every gesture is on camera. It is all evidence." Ashley's legs trembled. I didn't know." "You thought what?" Margaret cut her off. "That this was acceptable treatment for any human being? That racism is just good business?" She then turned to the weeping man on the floor. "Brad Mitchell, you used your body to block a customer from merchandise because of her race. You told me items weren't for my kind. You had a choice, Brad. You could have chosen decency. You chose racism." Her eyes found Tiffany Roberts hiding behind a clothing rack. "Tiffany Roberts, you loudly accused me of being a thief for the benefit of your social media followers. You turned my humiliation into your entertainment. You didn't mean to get caught, but you meant every word you said." Next was Kyle Stevens, cowering behind Brad. "Kyle Stevens, your monkey sounds are on camera. In this day and age, you made animal noises at a black woman. Explain to the federal investigators how that was a joke. Explain it to a jury." Finally, she looked at Jessica Parker. "Jessica Parker, You refused me service based on the color of my skin. The security footage says you see color quite clearly. Margaret took a step back, addressing them all. Each of you had a chance to do the right thing, to object, to intervene. Instead, you participated. You celebrated. Victoria stepped forward, holding a tablet displaying their termination papers, prepared with brutal efficiency. Ashley Hamilton, Margaret announced, her voice now formal, final. You are terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, assault, and discrimination. Security will escort you from the premises. Ashley crumpled against the counter. Please, my mortgage. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself the moment you raised your hand to me, Margaret replied, devoid of emotion. Brad Mitchell, she continued, her voice as cold and hard as the marble beneath their feet. You are terminated for discrimination and harassment. Your professional life in this industry is over. Your management training certification is revoked. You will receive no severance pay. Brad's composure shattered. He wept openly, the sounds ragged and desperate. My girlfriend is pregnant, he choked out. I can't lose this job. Please. Please give me another chance. You had your chance. Margaret's voice was devoid of pity. A chance to treat people with dignity. You chose racism instead. Tiffany Roberts, she turned, her gaze like ice. You are terminated for discrimination and harassment. We will be forwarding your social media posts to any future employers who conduct background checks. A thin wail of despair escaped Tiffany's lips. You're destroying my life. You destroyed your own life the moment you chose to discriminate against a customer. Kyle Stevens, Margaret continued, her voice a steady, damning rhythm. You are terminated for racist harassment. The video of your animal sounds will be preserved as evidence in federal court. Kyle's legs gave out, and he crumpled to his knees. I'm only 25, he whispered, horrified. This will follow me forever. It should, Margaret replied, her voice cold as the grave. Racism should follow you forever. Jessica Parker, you are terminated for discrimination and refusal of service. Your participation in this harassment is documented and will be reported to all relevant authorities. Jessica began to hyperventilate, her breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. I can't be unemployed. I have student loans. I have rent. You should have considered that, Margaret said, before you decided to treat a customer like a criminal because of her race. She surveyed the room, the scene of the destruction she had just wrought. The boutique, once a stage for their arrogance, was now a courtroom where sentences had been passed. 5 careers extinguished, 5 lives irrevocably altered, all for the hollow satisfaction of their prejudice. But Margaret wasn't finished. What she said next sent a tremor of shock through the very foundations of the retail industry. This wasn't an accident, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the now silent store. This was a test. For the past 6 months, I have been conducting surprise inspections at prestige boutique locations across the country. I dressed as a regular customer to document exactly how my employees treat people of different races. The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. Victoria, standing beside her, nodded grimly as she pulled up data on a tablet. Similar incidents occurred at 12 other locations, Margaret continued, her voice a litany of shame. In Atlanta, a black teenager was followed by security for an hour. In Chicago, a Latino family was falsely told the store was closing. In Phoenix, an elderly Asian woman was accused of shoplifting the very jewelry she was trying to purchase. In Miami, a Native American man was refused service entirely. The scope of the rot was staggering. This wasn't one bad store or one racist manager. It was a systemic, company-wide culture of discrimination, and Margaret had the receipts. Mass terminations are happening at all 13 locations right now, she declared. 47 employees are being fired today. This marks the largest single-day termination for racism in retail history. Margaret held up her phone, showing them a live feed from corporate headquarters. The screen was a flurry of motion. Executives on frantic calls, legal teams scrambling for the storm they knew was about to break. The FBI's Civil Rights Division has been contacted, she said, each word a hammer blow. The Department of Justice has been notified. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has opened a full investigation. This is no longer about your jobs. This is about federal crimes. At the mention of federal crimes, Ashley Hamilton's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted for a second time, crashing heavily to the floor. Brad Mitchell doubled over, vomiting into a nearby trash can. Tiffany Roberts was curled in a ball, in the grips of a full-blown panic attack. Kyle Stevens was on his phone, sobbing hysterically to his parents, and Jessica Parker simply stared at the wall, her expression one of complete catatonic shock. Security guards arrived to escort them from the building. As they were led away, one by one, their pleas and desperate bargaining echoed through the store, a pathetic final performance. Margaret watched them go, not with triumph, but with the grim satisfaction of a long-overdue justice finally being served. The woman they had underestimated, discriminated against, and assaulted had just dismantled their lives with the precision of a master chess player executing checkmate, and the consequences were only just beginning. The reckoning was complete, but the real work, the work of change, was just getting started. The racist employees were gone, but Margaret Washington was not finished. What happened next would transform not just one store, but an entire industry, setting the gold standard for how real change is forged when someone with power wields it for justice. Within hours, Margaret implemented changes that would revolutionize luxury retail. She brought in a new management team, their very presence a statement. The new store manager was Carmen Rodriguez, a 34-year-old Latina with 15 years of experience, repeatedly passed over for promotion because of her heritage. Her assistant manager was Marcus Thompson, a 29-year-old black man with an MBA, who had been told he wasn't a good cultural fit at other luxury brands. The sales team was a mosaic of talent. Asha Patel, an Indian-American woman who spoke 4 languages. David Kim, a Korean-American with a background in fashion design. Maria Santos, a Mexican-American single mother who had been relegated to department stores. And James Washington, Margaret's own nephew, a brilliant black man fresh out of business school, brimming with ideas about making luxury accessible. But new faces were not enough. Margaret mandated comprehensive bias training for every employee in the company. This was not the sterile 1-hour online module designed to check a box. This was an intensive, weeks-long immersion developed by leading experts. Employees would confront their implicit biases, learn cultural sensitivity, and study the painful history of discrimination in retail. The new zero-tolerance policy was not a guideline. It was an axiom carved into the company's very foundation. Any act of discrimination would result in immediate termination, a lifetime ban from any Margaret Washington company, and a report to industry blacklists. There would be no warnings, no second chances. Racism would mean immediate career death. Margaret's vision extended beyond her stores. She launched community outreach programs, scholarships for minority students in business, mentorship programs for underserved youth, and job training designed to break down the barriers to a career in luxury retail. The transformation of the store was breathtaking. When it reopened 3 days later, it was a different world. The new staff moved with purpose and pride, greeting every customer with genuine warmth. The air, once thick with judgment, was now light with respect. That evening, Margaret addressed her entire company in a global video conference. "Today marks a new chapter," she began, her voice resonating with authority. "Racism has no place in this company. Excellence means serving everyone with dignity." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I built this company on the belief that luxury should elevate everyone it touches. When we discriminate, we betray the very soul of this brand." Her voice grew stronger, delivering the message that would reshape an industry. True luxury isn't about who you exclude. It's about the excellence you provide to everyone who walks through your doors. It's about treating a teenager buying their first luxury item with the same respect as a billionaire buying their 100th. It's about understanding that dignity is not determined by a bank balance. The response was immediate and overwhelming. All across the company, hiring practices were overhauled and training programs expanded. The culture began to shift. Meanwhile, justice for the fired employees was swift and relentless. Ashley Hamilton faced criminal assault charges. The video of her slapping Margaret went viral, her face becoming a symbol of racist entitlement. Brad, Tiffany, and Jessica were permanently blacklisted from the industry, their names cautionary tales in HR departments nationwide, and Kyle Stevens became the poster child for millennial racism. His college disowned him, his family denounced him, and the video of his cruel mimicry became a training tool for what not to do. The store itself became an unlikely mecca, a model for inclusive luxury. Business schools sent students to study its transformation. And most importantly, the customers changed. Word spread through communities long excluded from such spaces. Families who had never felt welcome began to visit, showing their children that they belonged, that they were worthy of beauty and respect. Margaret would often visit the store unannounced, a quiet observer. She watched elderly black women admiring jewelry without a security guard shadowing their every move. She saw Latino families being helped by staff who spoke their language. She witnessed young black men treated not as threats, but as valued customers. The lesson was etched into the heart of an industry. True luxury is not about exclusion. It's about excellence in service for all. When you judge by appearance, you don't just lose a customer, you lose your humanity. The woman they had tried to humiliate had done more than fire a few employees. She had transformed an industry and proven that real power isn't about who you can push down. It's about who you can lift up. The legacy of that day would live on, written not in profits but in the quiet dignity afforded to every soul who walked through the door.